Here we see the end of Inquisitor's Trail-born Sabbath of Odo Hereticus, lying broken and mutated as the power he wished to harness backfired horrifically. He suffers the fate of many of Heresy and Inquisitors, wishing to harness powers of chaos to create a new vessel to guide humanity to a new future. However, who are the people surrounding his corpse? Why is one of them crowned by a golden halo of light? The figure in the golden halo is the Starchild of the Goat Emperor, the moniker given to a divine vessel captured by this foreign Inquisitor. Now, all of these terms may raise you many questions, but do not worry. Despite sounding quite insane, it does in fact fit into the lore of the grimdark future of the 42nd millennium. The picture, of course, is just a bit of homebrew fun. However, while many people make homebrew not really caring for the rules of the universe, and others do, sometimes it's fun to stand in the middle, take a concept which is quite crazy, and then tie it into the great web of weird and wonderful lore of Warhammer 40k. So why not lead by example, by examining the picture we saw before, starting with, well, something quite obvious. The people present in the picture were mostly beastmen. Beastmen, known as Homo sapiens varietas, are a type of abhuman found in the Imperium of Man and beyond. The concept, while known to most folk, is actually somewhat unheard of to people who do not deal in the niche bits of lore or specialist wargames. Beastmen have been present in 40k for a while, in fact being found in the very first book, hence where their Latin name comes from, and have been present in the game in both first and second edition of the game, in the first as part of many Chaos Cult forces, as well as Genestealers, and in the forces of Imperial Guard. However, in second edition they only would be found among the ranks of Chaos Cults, and later would be mostly missing for most of the game's existence. However, this would change in 2017 when Gore Halfhorn would return in one place where all these weird bits of lore return, Necromunda. However, Necromunda would not be the only place where you would find beastmen in the foreseeable future, as in the Blackstone Fortress game you would find simple beastmen miniatures among the ranks of Chaos forces, and later you would have a full release of beastmen for Guilty. However, as it stands, only Chaos forces can field beastmen to this day. However, they are not missing, as Imperial beastmen are still present in two games. The first game is of course Necromunda, as they can be found there as Gore Halfhorn, the beastman hard gun as mentioned earlier, as well as a variant of Venator gangs which were present in the last edition of Necromunda. The second game to house these beastmen is, surprisingly, Horus Heresy, as they're actually a variant of an army you can build with Imperialis militia rules, found under Abhuman Muster. So beastmen are clear, they are a part of the game from the start to this very day. However, what of this Goat Emperor? Well, as a little concept thrown in a White Dwarf 476, we would find a small band of beastmen following an imperial preacher, where a concept of Goat Emperor is floated about as a thing which exists due to difficulty of pronunciation for the beastmen. However, as it stands, the concept of beastmen worshipping the god Emperor as the giant beastman himself is not outside possibility. First of all, beastmen do in fact have their own culture. While it's secretive and little known, it makes sense for them to worship the god Emperor as something as themselves, as it is noted that they do somewhat consider themselves superior to normal humans, which in the grimdark future of the 42nd millennium makes sense. They are in fact much larger than regular humans and much tougher. And concept of worshipping the god Emperor as something else than a corpse on a throne or a man is not new, as House of Asher of Necromunda worships the god emperor as in fact god empress of mankind and mother of humanity, as it can be found in Terminal Overkill, as well as the somewhat more amusing concept, Virat Emperor, worshipped by certain Cawdor of House Cawdor and Redemption cults. The Image Emperor is a giant rat who is there to devour the heretics and cleanse the world. And so we have our Goat Emperor. Where do we go from there? Well, we have a part of the descriptor, the Starchild. Starchild is a bit more well known. The concept of Emperor's soul reborn as a new god to lead humanity into the new era, present originally in the Realm of Chaos books of Rogue Trader era. Nowadays, it is in fact back into focus as Horus Heresy shows a possibility of such soul indeed existing, as mentioned in the End of the Death second part. The concept of emperor being multiple gods is also not out of the question, as the Dark Imperium in fact does imply that emperor's psyche shattered, as the creature on the throne speaks of Gilliman, contradicting itself, calling it 1,000 different names. And the concept is present in cults as well, as Raskins of Necromunda do in fact worship the emperor as the world spirit, not as a corpse on a throne, while opposite belief is held by redemptionists of Necromunda. So who is to say that the concept of a Starchild of the Goat Emperor could not exist? Perhaps Starchild is not one entity, but multiple, all shaped by different faiths and different beliefs in the god Emperor. Now that we quickly have discussed the two parts of the descriptor, the Starchild and the Goat Emperor, we can go to the first one, the Divine Vessel. The origin of the concept is the game Inquisitor. Game known for its odd rules, being a game with narrative focus and no points cost, and in fact favoring very asymmetrical combat, as well as having very odd scale, being 44mm scale, which is almost double the size of conventional Warhammer miniatures. It was not popular due to that scale and difficulty preparing it. However, the game is still played to some extent to this day, usually in the conventional 40k scale, and that's where a lot of the movement of Inquisitor 28 is born, tied closely to Blanchitsu painting movement. One of the books for the game is a small source book called Forian Sourcebook. One book which you can actually read right now, because many of the Specialist Games books have been released for free by Games Workshop after the closing of Specialist Games division. You can find it, in fact, in the Lexicanum article for this very book. Forians are the movement of Inquisition seeking to find vessels holding the power of the god emperor or perhaps other gods, or even to create this vessel themselves. They named our Sebastian IV, the man who would save Imperium from the age of apostasy, as he was also considered to be the vessel of the emperor, at least by the few inquisitors at the time. There is, by the way, no actual proof that is true. The concept is fully made up by Inquisition and could be completely nonsense. However, they do seek out more of these possible vessels, often finding either powerful psykers or demon hosts in the process. Thus, many a saint of holy imperial cult were in fact demon hosts or chaos cultists. Forians themselves are split into a few branches, Forians in general being a Puritan cult seeking the Divine Vessel Reborn to either contain or protect, as they do in fact believe that rise of the new emperor could split Imperium and spell a disaster, as the concept of Starchild is actually closely tied to this. Starchild's birth would destroy Imperium. To save humanity, Imperium would have to die. And another branch exists, called Horusians, mentioned earlier. They are the madmen who thought Horus didn't go far enough. They wish to create a vessel to harness the power of chaos, much like navigators harness the warp, to create a new savior for humanity and to make chaos a tool, not an enemy. The paths this group goes about their actions is quite interesting. You will find such wonderful concepts as trying to create their own zombies using the zombie virus found around Eye of Terror, or to create a non-chaos version of the Obliterator virus. They are quite insane, and I quite adore them for that. But as it stands, you can read about them yourself. As said, the book is still in circulation and you can find it for free. And where does this rambling get us to? Well, to the original picture. Here we see the possible rebirth of the soul of the Emperor, or perhaps manifestation of faith, or just a mutation. Perhaps she is just a mutant, a powerful psyker with a certain set of mutations which give her divine appearance in the eyes of the imperial cult. So where does this rambling get us to? Well, to the original picture. Here we see the Starchild of the Goat Emperor, the divine vessel of the will of the Emperor in the eyes of some, but not all, Inquisitors. A grave danger to the Imperium if this is true, for again, what if the downtrodden beastmen have someone to stand behind and rise against their oppressors? Or perhaps she is just a mutant, with mutations which give her an appearance of a divine manifestation of the Emperor's will. Who knows what is true in the grimdark future? But what we do know is that this is a character, a simple homebrew, a leader to my army of Imperial Guard beastmen. And she comes from very silly concepts, looks quite silly. However, she's not breaking the lore as it's present. And that's the point. Everything is canon, not everything is true. The lore is there to be used as a tool to create your own little weirdos. So don't be afraid to make weirdos for your homebrew, and make sure to take inspiration from all over the place. Some notable inspirations being the Necromunda books were not as well known by many 40k fans and include some very silly concepts such as the modern rebirth of the oak-looking humans, known as Digonobs, usually from Gorkomorka, or human mercenaries from older books. They're still present as Goliaths working near the skull, painting themselves green in the ash of the wasteland, wielding Xenos weapons, which are clearly orc weapons, for the skull was destroyed by orcs. But don't be afraid to take inspiration from elsewhere as well. Both history and fiction in general has a lot of suggestions for you. Go read the inspirations for Warhammer 40,000 as it was present, so be it Dune, Elric series, or even 2000 AD. I myself would recommend Nemesis the Warlock. It's a quite fun story and gives you a concept of perhaps your protagonist should be a 3-meter tall red alien who worships chaos, and perhaps your bad guy is someone who is an Inquisitor.